Sleepers! Let's go! If you don't know who I am, I'm James Coe, aka the Sleeper King. I am a long-time award-winning fantasy football analyst. I've worked at places like NFL Network, NFL Red Zone. I've worked at Amazon Prime Sports. I've worked in a lot of different places. If you appreciate the info, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Let's get going. Because of the injuries, because of matchups, man, I got a lot of sleepers, and we need it because we've got 4 teams on a bye. At quarterback, we like Justin Fields. You know why? Because he's playing Dallas. Look, not only has Dallas given up the most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, on average, they're allowing 3 touchdowns per game to opposing quarterbacks. Also of note, the Cowboys have allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks this year. I think that pairs perfectly with what Justin Fields likes to get done. Look, you want to play almost all of your Houston Texans against the Baltimore Ravens right now. The defense was already not good, and the number of injuries on the defensive side of the football are staggering. Pro Bowl defensive tackle Nnamdi Madubuike, he's suffering a career-threatening neck injury. Defensive end Broderick Washington, he was placed on IR. Linebacker Roquan Smith, all-pro corner Marlon Humphreys, they're both expected to miss multiple weeks. Cornerback Nate Wiggins, cornerback Chidi Awuzie, they're also dealing with injuries. And oh, by the way, when this defense was healthy, it's not like they were good anyway. And when it comes to CJ Stroud himself, he looked a lot more comfortable there in week number 4, calling plays at the line. Let's see if he could build on that against a ravaged Baltimore secondary. At this point, everyone's so on top of Woody Marks, I don't even know if I consider him to be a sleeper. But I tell you what, if you've got him, fire him up against the Ravens. He played 58% of the snaps versus Nick Chubb's 40%. Marks also had more carries, targets, and receptions than Chubb last week. Now, all of that being said, I want to issue a word of caution. It was a total blowout against Tennessee. Usage, snap share, all of those things, they get a little wonky in blowouts like that. Like I said, I'm not trying to throw a bunch of cold water onto Woody Marks. You definitely want to play him against Baltimore. I'm just saying, temper expectations a little bit. You know who Woody Marks went crazy against? That would be the Tennessee Titans. You know who Michael Carter is playing this week? That would be the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are getting blasted on the ground, man. They are bottom 10 in yards before contact allowed, yards after contact allowed. They are bottom 10 in explosive run rate allowed to opposing running backs. They've also forced the 4th lowest run stuff rate. When you add all of that stuff into the blender, they've given up the 3rd most rushing yards to opposing running backs. We don't totally know what the usage is, but Michael Carter did indicate to reporters that he will be stepping into the starting role there for Arizona, presumably with Amari DeMercado retaining that pass-catching role. Listen, I would not go out there and call myself the Sleeper King if I was not able to procure you some deep sleepers at the running back position. One of those players has to be Isaiah Davis. Shoot, I might like Isaiah Davis more than Michael Carter. In New York, Isaiah Davis is now the direct backup to Breece Hall, taking on that aforementioned bad Dallas defense. Braylon Allen is working through a knee injury. He might go on IR right now. If Isaiah Davis is available on your waiver wire, you need to go pick him up. And here's the thing, Davis was low-key better than Braylon Allen last week. 5.8 yards per carry for Isaiah Davis, 3.6 yards per carry for Braylon Allen. Do not be surprised if Isaiah Davis takes home 40% of the snaps this week and moving forward, so long as Braylon Allen is injured. Again, if you are desperate, look at Ollie Gordon taking on the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers were awful. I mean, terrible against the run last year, and they have continued that trend going into 2025. This is a unit that is dead last in run stuff rate allowed. They're bottom 5 in yards before contact and yards after contact allowed to opposing running backs. We know Devin Achane is going to dominate the touches, probably 70 to 75% snap share. But even with limited touches, because of how bad Carolina's run defense is, I think Ollie Gordon could be productive. And shoot, do not be surprised if he gets a goal line carry and sneaks one across the end zone. Tommy Tremble taking on Miami's defense. Listen, until we see something different, we want to play our tight ends against Miami. Starting tight ends have scored 11 plus PPR points against the Dolphins in 3 of their first 4 games. Jatavion Sanders still working through his ankle injury. Tommy Tremble was utilized quite a bit in week 4 as well. I think he's a very sneaky sleeper play and a pretty good play in DFS as well. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm going to stay in that same game again. Look at a different tight end. This time I'm talking about Darren Waller. Waller was a popular waiver wire ad, but I don't think his production was fluky last week. Yes, he only ran 10 routes. Yes, he only played 25% of the snaps. But this was his first game back from an incredibly long layoff. I think that Miami will get him ramped up as time wears on. Now remember this, Jonnu Smith last year for Miami had ludicrous usage. Now with Tyreek Hill out for the year, I would be 0% surprised to see Darren Waller take on that Jonnu Smith role and be the second target getter on this Miami offense. Again, if you're desperate at tight end, I also really like Theo Johnson there in New York. Once Malik Neighbors went down with injury, Theo Johnson's usage went way up. His 5 targets on the game were actually tied for the team lead, and he did catch a touchdown pass as well. Look for the young Jackson Dart to rely on his athletic tight end as a safety blanket. In addition to Theo Johnson, I really like Darius Slayton against this same New Orleans defense. The Saints have given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers lined up outside, and this is the same defense that has given up strong performances to JSN, Jawan Jennings, and Marvin Harrison Jr. The Saints have allowed a ridiculous 73.7% completion rate to receivers lined up on the outside. That's the 2nd worst in the NFL. The 12.4 yards per target allowed to receivers on the outside, that's also the 2nd worst. Chunky gains could be on the way for Darius Slayton. I talked about how you want to play your Houston Texans against the Baltimore Ravens. We already know, listen, Nico Collins smash spot. But Christian Kirk, while he's been slow in the stat sheet, has been utilized a lot in this Houston offense. I could see him getting 4 or 5 catches for 50 yards this week against a Baltimore secondary that has given up literally the most fantasy points to receivers in the slot this year. I love Stefon Diggs against the Buffalo Bills this week. You want to know why? Because of revenge! Diggs has been ramping up his usage and production over the last week. As a matter of fact, in week 4, he finally cracked the century mark against Carolina. And man, my guy Diggs is catching everything. He's caught 19 receptions on 22 targets. That's insane. But you know what he hasn't caught? He hasn't caught a touchdown yet. This is not analytics, but man, my man is due for a score. Meanwhile, Buffalo's given up a touchdown to primary outside wide receivers in 3 of their first 4 games. We really like Rashid Shaheed against the Giants this week because, man, the Giants have struggled to contain outside wide receivers. They have given up the 2nd most receptions and the 5th most yards. As a matter of fact, they've given up a touchdown to an outside wide receiver in 3 straight weeks. So yes, while we love Chris Olave, do not forget about Rashid Shaheed as a potential sleeper play this week. Finally, let's talk about Elic Ayomanor taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Ayomanor quietly emerged as the Titans' #1 go-to receiver last week, surpassing Calvin Ridley, who, man, quite frankly, he is not playing very well. The rookie actually led the team in routes run, targets, and receptions last week, surpassing Calvin Ridley on all 3 of those benchmarks. And I don't think this is a fluke. Remember, they changed play callers. Bo Hardegree, the quarterback's coach, is now playing calls for Tennessee. I'm assuming Hardegree is like the rest of us. He's seen a lot more from Ayomanor than from Ridley this year. And by the way, the matchup is good. Arizona has really struggled to stay healthy at outside corner. As a result, they're bottom 10 in both receptions and yards allowed to the outside. You know what they have not allowed, though? They have not allowed a touchdown to an outside wide receiver. That strikes me as pretty strange. I think that may change this week against Tennessee. All right, man, that's it for me. If you appreciate the information, like I said, man, if you would hit the like and subscribe, very much appreciated. We'll see you next week.